I was stationed at Dugway Proving Ground in 2003. Something escaped from Test Zone 13. The desert wind whispered across the barren landscape of Utah's Great Salt Lake Desert, carrying dust and secrets in equal measure. Dugway Proving Ground sprawled across nearly 800,000 acres of this desolation, its facilities deliberately isolated from civilization. The sign at the perimeter fence read Biological and Chemical Weapons Testing Facility, Unauthorized Entry Prohibited, but those who worked within its boundaries knew the facility's true scope extended far beyond its official designation. In April 2003, as American forces pushed toward Baghdad, attention focused overseas. Few noticed the increased activity at Test Zone 13, a windowless concrete structure situated in Dugway's most remote sector. Even among Dugway personnel, access to the zone was severely restricted. Dr. Lawrence Winters checked his watch as he entered his security code, 11:42 p.m. The night shift was fully staffed for the scheduled test, with 6 researchers and 2 security personnel manning their stations. Project Echo Variant had progressed to its final testing phase, and Winters felt the familiar mixture of excitement and apprehension that accompanied breakthrough moments. "Evening, Doctor," said James Harrington, the senior security specialist assigned to the zone. His military posture and vigilant eyes betrayed his special forces background. "All systems are green. We're ready when you are." Winters nodded. "Let's proceed." Test Zone 13's central laboratory housed a negative pressure chamber, where the modified prion proteins were suspended in a nutrient solution. The official goal: create compounds that enhanced neural transmission for improved battlefield cognition. The unofficial research, conducted during off hours and absent from all documentation, involved integration with fungal specimens collected from the surrounding desert, specimens with remarkable adaptive properties. "Initiating sequence," announced Dr. Amara Okafor, the team's microbiologist. Her fingers moved across the control panel with practiced precision. Behind the 3-inch glass of the observation window, mechanical arms manipulated the testing environment. Samples are responding to stimulus. Neural activity increasing at expected parameters. The organisms in the chamber began to glow with a faint blue luminescence that pulsed in rhythmic patterns. The team had observed this phenomenon before, but tonight the patterns seemed more organized, almost geometric. "Are you recording this?" Winters asked the technician monitoring the visual feed. "Yes, sir, though there's some interference in the feed." The lights flickered. Once, twice. The emergency generator kicked in with a low hum, but for 4.7 seconds. As the subsequent investigation would determine, the negative pressure system failed. The subtle shift in air current was barely noticeable, except to Harrington, whose trained senses detected the momentary change in the room's atmosphere. "Dr. Winters," he said, voice tense, "did we just lose containment?" Winters glanced at the monitoring systems as they rebooted, green lights across the board. Negative. Backup systems engaged properly. Chamber integrity maintained. He turned to the team. "Continue the test sequence," but Harrington had served in enough high-risk environments to trust his instincts. Something had changed in those few seconds. He made a note in his security log. Momentary power fluctuation at 23:47. All systems recovered. Recommend full diagnostic. The test concluded at 2:13 a.m. Results exceeded expectations, with the modified proteins demonstrating a 47% increase in transmission efficiency. As the team filed out, Harrington remained to complete his security sweep. Alone in the dimly lit corridor outside the main lab, he paused. Something moved in his peripheral vision, a shadow that seemed to bend at impossible angles. He turned quickly, hand instinctively moving to his sidearm. Nothing. The corridor was empty, yet the sensation of being watched lingered. "Security sweep complete," he reported into his radio. "All secure." The official record would show an equipment malfunction with no biological release, the first of many lies that would surround Test Zone 13. 3 days later, Private Lewis Camden, assigned to night patrol of the facility's eastern perimeter, reported seeing geometric shadows that moved independently of any light source. His supervisor attributed it to fatigue and ordered him to complete his shift. By the end of the week, Dr. Okafor complained of migraines that intensified when she worked with electronic equipment. The medical officer prescribed standard analgesics and noted possible stress reaction in her file. Technician Robert Keller discovered fine, thread-like growths between his fingers while showering. When he reported to the medical bay, the growths had vanished, leaving only faint red lines on his skin. Dermatitis, the physician assistant concluded, likely reaction to the new hand sanitizer. Dr. Winters noticed the pattern emerging. 6 personnel, all present during the power fluctuation, all experiencing anomalous symptoms. When he proposed implementing Level 4 containment protocols, Colonel Harrison Wade, the military liaison for Echo Variant, rejected the recommendation. "We're at war, Doctor," Wade said, leaning across his desk. "The Joint Chiefs are expecting our cognitive enhancement results next month. There was no containment breach. Your concerns are noted, but we're proceeding as scheduled." Winters recognized the political reality. With the nation focused on Iraq, no one wanted a potential biological incident on American soil. "At least let me run additional tests on the affected personnel," he argued. "Fine, but discreetly, and they stay on duty." That night, Harrington stood in the shower of his on-base housing unit, watching water swirl down the drain. The patterns in the water seemed to form and reform into the same configurations he'd glimpsed in the shadows of Test Zone 13. For a moment, he could swear they were trying to communicate something, a message, a warning. When he closed his eyes, he saw the Utah desert, but not as it appeared in reality. In his vision, the desert floor was transparent, revealing vast networks of something ancient and patient that had waited beneath the surface for millennia. "Just tired," he muttered, shutting off the water. But as he reached for his towel, he caught his reflection in the mirror. For just a second, his eyes had appeared milky white, like those of a blind man who could somehow still see. The breach had occurred, and it was already too late to contain what had escaped. May arrived with unseasonable heat that baked the Utah desert into a cracked wasteland. Inside Test Zone 13, the climate-controlled environment maintained a constant 68 degrees, but Dr. Winters felt a different kind of heat, the pressure of mounting evidence that something had gone terribly wrong. "Another one," Dr. Okafor said, sliding a medical file across his desk. "Rodriguez, from maintenance. He was nowhere near the lab during testing, but he serviced the ventilation system 2 days later." Winters reviewed the file. Rodriguez reported auditory hallucinations, voices speaking in patterns rather than words, creating what he described as mathematical sentences. "That makes 9 personnel with anomalous symptoms," Winter said. "We need to initiate quarantine protocols." "Wade won't approve it," Okafor replied. "He's already arranging transfers for the affected personnel." "Transfers? Where?" "Various military installations. Camden to Fort Detrick, Keller to Joint Base Lewis McChord, and Harrington." "Where are they sending Harrington?" "Some town in Ohio. Millfield. There's a reserve unit there he'll be assigned to while receiving specialized treatments for PTSD." Winters slammed his fist on the desk. "They're spreading it. Whatever this is, they're going to spread it across the country." His last attempt to implement containment protocols was met with a direct order. The incident was classified, and all personnel were to maintain absolute silence. By month's end, all 9 affected individuals had been transferred, their medical records sealed under national security provisions. James Harrington arrived in Millfield, Ohio, on June 3rd. His wife, Catherine, had preceded him, setting up their new home on Sycamore Lane, a quiet street lined with identical houses built in the 1970s. She noticed the changes in her husband. Immediately, the distant stare, the periods of unresponsive silence, the night sweats. The doctors at Dugway said, "It might be like this for a while," James explained, unpacking his meager belongings. "Just need some time to adjust." Catherine wasn't convinced. James had served 3 tours in high-conflict zones without developing PTSD. What had happened at Dugway to break her unbreakable husband? That night, she awoke to find his side of the bed empty. "James," he didn't respond. When she touched his arm, his skin felt cool, almost waxy. "James, you're scaring me." He turned slowly, his expression blank. "It's so thin here," he whispered. "The membrane. I can almost see through it." "What membrane? What are you talking about?" His eyes focused, confusion replacing the vacant stare. "Catherine, why are we in the basement? You tell me. You were sleepwalking, or something." He rubbed his face. "Sorry. Bad dream, I guess." But it wasn't the last time. 3 nights later, she found him again, this time with a piece of chalk, drawing intricate patterns on the concrete floor, concentric circles filled with angular symbols that resembled no language she recognized. In Atlanta, Dr. Abigail Foster pored over epidemiological data at the CDC. A statistical anomaly had caught her attention. Clusters of unusual neurological symptoms reported near military installations across the country. The cases shared distinctive features: sensory disturbances, geometric visual hallucinations, episodes of dissociation, and most curiously, reported sensitivity to electromagnetic fields. "There's a pattern here," she told her supervisor, Dr. Russell Harding. "These cases are appearing within a 30-mile radius of specific military bases." Harding skimmed her report. "Correlation doesn't imply causation, Abby. This could be coincidental clustering. 7 independent clusters all manifesting within weeks of each other, with nearly identical symptom profiles. That's beyond coincidence." "What's your hypothesis then?" "I don't know yet, but the first cases appeared near facilities associated with chemical and biological research. I'd like to investigate further." "Fine, but keep it low-key. The last thing we need is to create panic over what might be nothing." Foster began compiling case histories, tracing the spread of symptoms through communities. The first civilian cases appeared in Frederick, Maryland, near Fort Detrick. 3 individuals reporting identical dreams featuring desert landscapes and underground structures. Similar reports emerged near other bases, always beginning 2-3 weeks after the arrival of personnel transferred from Dugway. By late June, the phenomenon had expanded beyond dreams. In Tacoma, Washington, wildlife behaved in coordinated patterns, flocks of birds forming perfect geometric shapes, coyotes from different packs, gathering in precise circles at dawn. In San Antonio, Texas, 3 families in the same neighborhood discovered identical fungal growth patterns on their basement walls, patterns that rearranged themselves when not observed directly. At Dugway, Dr. Winters conducted his own illicit investigation. Late at night, he examined samples from the ventilation filters nearest test zone 13. Under the microscope, he found what he feared: microscopic spores unlike anything in the facility's biological database. They possessed characteristics of fungi, viruses, and prions simultaneously, their structure shifting even as he observed them. When he returned the following night to collect more samples, he found the entire ventilation system had been replaced, and the old components incinerated by order of Colonel Wade. In Millfield, Catherine Harrington's concern deepened into fear. James's episodes increased in frequency and duration. He filled notebooks with drawings and equations, working with feverish intensity before collapsing into exhausted sleep. "What are you trying to calculate?" she asked, examining the incomprehensible figures. "Coordinates," he mumbled, Nodes in the network. Who is James? Who's trying to connect? He looked at her with sudden clarity. I don't know, he whispered. But they're using me somehow, using all of us. I can feel others like me, working on the same problem from different angles. Catherine searched online for answers, joining medical forums and PTSD support groups. Her posts grew increasingly desperate. Husband ex-military experiencing strange episodes, draws complex patterns, talks about membranes and networks. Military doctors unresponsive, please help. On June 30th, Dr. Foster discovered these posts. The descriptions matched patterns she'd observed in her investigation. When she attempted to access medical records for recently transferred Dugway personnel, she encountered classified barriers that required clearance levels beyond her authority. That same night, Catherine woke at 3 a.m. to find James standing motionless in their basement again. This time he had arranged household objects, lamps, chairs, kitchenware, into a configuration that, from a specific angle, created the illusion of a doorway where only blank wall existed. James, she said, voice trembling. What is this? Thinning the membrane, he whispered, eyes fixed on the illusory doorway. They're getting closer. Soon they'll have enough of us to make the crossing. Catherine reached for her phone to call for help, but James's hand shot out with startling speed, gripping her wrist. Don't, he said, his voice suddenly normal. They're monitoring the phones. They'll take me away if they know how far it's progressed. Who will take you away? The same people who transferred us here. They know what escaped from Test Zone 13. They're watching to see what happens, how it spreads. His eyes, clear and focused, held hers. Something got into me that night, Catherine. Something not from here. And I'm afraid it's not just changing me. It's using me to change everything. July brought record temperatures across the country, as if the heat itself were an accomplice to what was spreading. Dr. Foster's map of affected areas had expanded to include 12 distinct clusters, each radiating outward from military installations, housing transferred Dugway personnel. In her Atlanta office, she placed pushpins on a large United States map, color-coded by symptom type: red for shared dream states, blue for electromagnetic sensitivities, yellow for inexplicable growth patterns or constructions, green for coordinated animal behavior. It's spreading faster than I anticipated, she told Dr. Harding, who had grown increasingly concerned as evidence mounted. And the symptoms are evolving. Early cases showed only neurological anomalies. Now we're seeing environmental effects. Environmental effects? Foster handed him photographs from Tacoma, local wildlife exhibiting synchronized behaviors, plants growing in non-random patterns, and this. She showed him an image of fungal growth on a basement wall, arranged in a complex geometric structure. This was photographed in 3 separate households, miles apart. The pattern is identical, down to the millimeter. Harding studied the images. Could be a hoax. I verified the sources personally. And there's more. She showed him time-lapse photographs of the fungal patterns. They're changing position, not growing, physically relocating, when unobserved. That's impossible. According to established biology, yes. But whatever this is, it's not following established rules. In Millfield, Ohio, James Harrington's condition deteriorated further. His lucid periods grew shorter, the episodes more intense. Catherine found him dismantling household electronics, repurposing components into devices whose function she couldn't determine. What are you building, James? She asked during one of his coherent moments. I don't know, he admitted, examining the strange assembly of wires and metal in his hands. When it happens, I understand perfectly. Then I wake up and, he gestured helplessly at the device. I think it's some kind of amplifier. But for what? I don't know. More disturbing were the neighbors. Elaine Garrett, from 2 doors down, had begun bringing James materials, wire, electronic components, metals. When Catherine questioned her, Elaine seemed confused. "I just felt like James needed these," she said. "I found them in my garage. Didn't even know we had them." Then David Mercer from across the street appeared with a specific type of crystal oscillator. Then retired physics teacher William Cooper arrived with precisely calibrated measuring instruments. None had any connection to Dugway. None could explain their compulsion to assist James. Catherine documented everything, taking photographs and keeping detailed notes. When James began transforming their basement into what appeared to be a recreation of some facility, installing work surfaces, measurement devices, and drawing detailed floor plans on the walls, she recognized the shape from his earlier drawings. Test Zone 13. But how could he recreate a classified facility he'd never seen the blueprints for? In her desperation, she returned to the online forums, posting more detailed descriptions and photographs. "My husband is building some kind of device with help from neighbors who don't know why they're helping. Military background. Possible exposure to unknown agent at Dugway Proving Ground. Please, if anyone has information about similar cases or knows someone who worked at Dugway, contact me." Dr. Foster found these posts during her nightly research. The photographs showed configurations similar to those appearing in other affected communities, but more advanced, more deliberate. She attempted to contact Catherine directly, but received no response. When she tried accessing James Harrington's military records, she encountered the same classified barriers that had blocked her previous inquiries. Her frustration mounting, Foster tried a different approach. She contacted a former colleague, now working at the Department of Defense, Dr. Neil Lawrence. "Neil, I need information about personnel transfers from Dugway Proving Ground between April and June this year, particularly anyone exhibiting unusual medical symptoms." "Why are you asking about Dugway?" Lawrence's voice turned cautious. "I'm tracking a potential pathogen with unusual neurological effects. The pattern suggests Dugway as the point of origin." A long silence followed. "People are being affected, Neil. Civilians, children. If something escaped from Dugway..." "Nothing escaped from Dugway," he said sharply. "There was an equipment malfunction, nothing more. The personnel transfers were routine." "Then why are identical symptom clusters appearing in communities surrounding the bases where they were transferred?" Another pause. "I can't discuss this further, but as a friend, I'm warning you. There are people monitoring these inquiries, powerful people who believe containment is still possible." "Containment of what, Neil?" The line went dead. In San Antonio, a 6-year-old girl constructed a perfect scale model of Test Zone 13 using building blocks, despite having no connection to anyone from Dugway. In Tacoma, 3 unrelated individuals began working on devices similar to those James Harrington was building in Ohio. In Maryland, an entire neighborhood reported the same dream on the same night, a vast underground network awakening beneath the desert. Foster's map now showed the affected areas forming a pattern themselves, 7 distinct nodes across the country, positioned according to a geometric arrangement she couldn't yet decipher. In mid-July, she received an anonymous package containing a single flash drive. The sender had taken elaborate precautions. The package was routed through multiple states, the drive encrypted with advanced protocols. When she finally accessed its contents, she found personnel files for 9 individuals transferred from Dugway, including James Harrington. All had been present during an incident in Test Zone 13 on April 7, 2003. All had exhibited similar initial symptoms before being dispersed to different facilities. And most disturbingly, all had been diagnosed with an identical condition: stress-induced neurological anomalies consistent with Gulf War Syndrome variant. The file included a confidential memo from Colonel Harrison Wade: subjects to be monitored but maintained in civilian proximity, containment through dispersion protocol activated. Observe and document all manifestations for Project EHO variant secondary phase analysis. They weren't trying to prevent the spread, Foster realized with horror. They were deliberately allowing it to happen, studying it. That night, Catherine Harrington found James in their basement again. The transformation was now complete. The space was an exact replica of a laboratory setup, with equipment whose function she couldn't begin to guess. James stood at its center, surrounded by 5 neighbors, all working in coordinated silence. "James," she said. "James, please talk to me." He turned, and for a moment she saw her husband in his eyes. "Catherine," he whispered. "I can see what they want now. They're building a network, human minds connected like nodes, in a vast system." He gestured to the neighbors. "These people aren't infected like me. They're just receivers, picking up instructions." Instructions for what? To build something. 7 somethings, actually, in 7 locations. His eyes began to cloud over again. "They've been here before, Catherine. Long ago, left something of themselves, buried deep, waiting to be awakened." Before she could question him further, his expression went blank, and he returned to his work with mechanical precision. That night, Catherine finally received a response to her forum posts. A private message from Dr. Abigail Foster of the CDC, requesting an urgent meeting. "I believe I know what happened at Dugway," the message read, "and I think your husband is at the center of whatever is spreading across the country." Dr. Abigail Foster arrived in Millfield on a rainy September morning, her rental car splashing through puddles that reflected a gray, oppressive sky. The suburban street where the Harringtons lived presented a facade of normalcy: trimmed lawns, American flags, children's bicycles leaning against porches. Only a trained eye would notice the subtle wrongness: windows with shades drawn at midday, the absence of normal outdoor activity, the eerie stillness that permeated the neighborhood. Catherine Harrington answered the door on the first knock, her face pale and drawn from weeks of mounting fear. "Dr. Foster? Thank God you've come. Please hurry inside." Foster followed her through a house that bore the marks of neglect: unwashed dishes in the sink, mail piled on countertops, clothes draped over furniture. Catherine led her directly to the basement door. "Before we go down there, you should know, it's not just James anymore. There are usually others with him, neighbors, people he never knew before we moved here. They come and go at all hours, working on whatever it is they're building." "How many people are involved?" "At least 12 that I've seen, maybe more." "And none had previous connections to Dugway?" Catherine shook her head. "No military connections at all, just ordinary people. A teacher, a postal worker, a retired accountant. They all started experiencing headaches about a month after we arrived. Then they began showing up here, bringing things, helping James." Foster's grip tightened on her medical bag. "I need to see him." The basement had been transformed beyond recognition. The original concrete walls were now covered with intricate diagrams, mathematical equations, and architectural drawings. The central space housed a structure resembling a particle accelerator in miniature, with concentric rings of metal and crystalline materials surrounding a central platform. James Harrington stood at a workbench, soldering components with precise movements. 2 neighbors, a middle-aged woman and an elderly man, worked silently alongside him. None acknowledged Foster's entrance. "They get like this when they're working," Catherine whispered. "It's like they're in a trance." Foster approached cautiously. "Mr. Harrington, I'm Dr. Abigail Foster, from the CDC. I'd like to speak with you about what happened at Dugway." James continued working for several seconds, then abruptly stopped. He turned slowly, his eyes gradually focusing, as if returning from a great distance. "Doctor," he said, his voice hoarse, "you've been looking for us, looking for answers." "Yes, I believe something was released at Dugway, something that's spreading." James laughed. A hollow, unsettling sound. "Not released, awakened." He gestured for her to follow him. to a corner of the basement, where maps were pinned to the wall. Red strings connected 7 locations across the United States. "Here," he said, pointing to Millfield. "And here." His finger moved to San Antonio. "And here, Tacoma. 4 more. 7 nodes in total. What are these locations? What connects them? They form a pattern, a geometric structure that creates resonance." He traced the shape formed by the 7 points. This configuration matches a constellation, but not one visible from Earth. They knew this shape, remembered it. They? Who are they, Mr. Harrington? His eyes clouded briefly. The ones beneath. The ones who were here first. He blinked, focus returning. Something lived in those desert fungi, dormant spores that fell to Earth thousands of years ago. Our experiments woke them, changed them. Now they're changing us. Foster removed a small device from her bag, a handheld medical scanner. "May I?" James nodded. She ran the scanner over his arm, neck, and forehead, studying the readings. "Your neural activity is off the charts. Brainwave patterns I've never seen before." She moved to one of the neighbors, scanning them as well. "Different pattern here, less intense, more receptive." "The receivers," James confirmed. "I'm a transmitter. There are 9 of us. The original 9 from Dugway. We process and transmit. The receivers implement." Foster continued examining the basement laboratory, taking samples from surfaces and photographing the diagrams. Amplification, communication. James ran his hand over the central platform, a doorway of sorts. Between what and what? Between here and elsewhere. They exist in a space adjacent to our reality, not parallel, adjacent. The membrane between dimensions is thinnest at certain points. This is one. They've been reaching through a little at a time, changing us, so we can help them cross over completely. Foster's scientific mind rebelled against such concepts, but the evidence surrounding her defied conventional explanation. "These diagrams," she said, examining the wall. "This is Test Zone 13, isn't it? The facility at Dugway?" "Yes. Though I never saw the actual blueprints. They showed me through memories that aren't mine. And this?" She pointed to a larger diagram, showing what appeared to be a vast underground structure beneath the facility. "What's really there? What they built long ago before humans. A waiting place." Catherine, who had been silent, stepped forward. James has moments of lucidity, like now. They're becoming rarer. Sometimes he's himself for an hour, sometimes just minutes. As if on cue, James's expression shifted, eyes growing distant. "They're coming," he whispered. "The network is nearly complete." Foster turned to Catherine. "I need to take samples, blood, tissue, whatever he'll allow, and I need to document everything in this basement." For the next 2 hours, Foster collected biological samples from James and the 2 neighbors, who remained in their trance-like state, unresponsive to questions, but offering no resistance to the examinations. She photographed every diagram, recorded measurements of the strange device, and took environmental samples from throughout the basement. James remained mostly unresponsive, occasionally muttering phrases in what sounded like multiple voices overlapping. Convergence imminent, signal, strength, optimal, prepare the anchors. As evening approached, Foster and Catherine retreated upstairs to discuss her findings. "What he's describing is impossible," Foster said, organizing her samples. "Extraterrestrial spores, interdimensional contact, collective consciousness networks. It contradicts everything we understand about physics and biology." "But you've seen the evidence," Catherine replied. "The identical constructions in different locations, the shared dreams, the coordinated behaviors." "Yes, and the biological samples show definite anomalies, cellular structures that self-modify, neural patterns that synchronize across individuals with no direct contact." Foster rubbed her temples. "It's as if the fundamental laws of nature are being rewritten." Can you help him? Reverse whatever this is. Foster hesitated. I don't know. First, I need to understand exactly what we're dealing with. These samples might provide answers, but I'll need equipment I don't have here. A crash from the basement interrupted them. They rushed downstairs to find James convulsing on the floor, his back arched at an impossible angle, while the two neighbors continued working, as if nothing were happening. Foster knelt beside him, checking his vital signs. James, Catherine cried, trying to hold him. Suddenly, he went rigid, then relaxed. When his eyes opened, they were clear, focused, more present than Foster had seen since her arrival. I can see it all now, he whispered. The whole network, all 7 nodes, all 9 transmitters. He gripped Foster's arm with surprising strength. They're not trying to talk to us, they're trying to talk through us. We're just the instruments. Who is trying to talk, James? Foster asked. What do they want? They're ancient. They seeded life on Earth billions of years ago, as an experiment. Then they left. But a part of them remained dormant, waiting. They're coming back now to check on their experiment, to harvest what they created. Harvest what? Knowledge, resources, consciousness. They feed on it, evolve through it. His grip tightened. They've done this before, on other worlds. They seed life, let it evolve consciousness, then return to absorb it. We're cattle to them. Crop. Catherine sobbed quietly beside him. How do we stop them? James turned to her, his expression softening. I don't know if we can. The network is almost complete. Once all 7 amplifiers are activated simultaneously, he trailed off, his eyes growing distant again. James, Catherine shook him gently. James, stay with me. His expression changed, hardening into something alien. When he spoke again, his voice contained harmonics that made Foster's skin crawl. The gate is opening, he said. But it wasn't James speaking anymore. The network is complete. What was divided will be whole. His body went limp, consciousness fading. At the same moment, both neighbors stopped working and turned toward the stairs with robotic synchronization. It's time, they said, in perfect unison. We must prepare for their arrival. They ascended the stairs without another word, leaving Foster and Catherine alone with the unconscious James and the ominous device that continued to pulse with faint blue light, the same luminescence Dr. Winters had observed in Test Zone 13 months earlier. We need to get him out of here, Foster said urgently, and I need to contact my colleagues at the CDC. Where would we go? Catherine asked. If what James said is true, this is happening in 7 locations simultaneously. Foster thought of the classified files, the deliberate dispersal of the affected Dugway personnel. There's only one place we might find answers, she said grimly. We need to go back to where it started. We need to go to Dugway. The black SUVs arrived at dawn, rolling silently into Millfield with military precision. 6 vehicles, government plates, windows tinted beyond legal limits. They formed a perimeter around the Harrington residence, while men in hazmat suits established containment barriers under the guise of a chemical spill. From her hotel room 2 blocks away, Dr. Foster watched through binoculars. She had anticipated this response after uploading her preliminary findings to a secure CDC server the previous night, a calculated risk to alert trusted colleagues. The response had come faster than expected. Her phone vibrated, an unlisted number. Foster, she answered tersely. You've made a serious mistake, Doctor. The voice was male, authoritative. Your unauthorized investigation has compromised national security protocols. Who am I speaking to? Colonel Richard Vance, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. I'm currently standing outside what I believe is your hotel, wondering why you're not at the primary containment site with the Harrington subject. Foster's pulse quickened. She moved away from the window. Catherine Harrington contacted me about her husband's condition. I'm conducting a legitimate public health investigation. You're interfering with a classified military operation, Doctor. We've been monitoring the Harrington subject since transfer. Everything that's happened has been according to protocol. Protocol? Foster felt a surge of anger. You deliberately spread this organism across the country. You're using civilians as lab rats. Containment through dispersion, Vance replied coldly. The organism's effects are diluted when the primary hosts are separated. It buys us time to study the phenomenon without risk of concentrated manifestation. That's not what's happening, and you know it. They're building something in 7 locations, working towards some kind of synchronized event. A pause. How much did Harrington tell you? Enough to know you people have no idea what you're dealing with. This isn't a biological weapon or a pathogen. It's something else entirely. Your expertise is noted, Doctor, but your involvement ends now. Federal agents are entering your hotel. I suggest you cooperate. Foster ended the call and grabbed her pre-packed bag. The biological samples from the Harrington basement were sealed in specialized containers, along with her notes and a hard drive containing all her documentation. She'd anticipated this possibility from the moment she'd seen the classified memo. Her room was on the 2nd floor, with a fire escape outside the bathroom window. As she heard footsteps in the hallway, she slipped through the window and descended quickly, dropping into the alley below, just as her door was breached. Catherine Harrington waited in a borrowed car 2 blocks away. James slumped in the back seat, semi-conscious but stable. They came for you too? Catherine asked, as Foster slid into the passenger seat. Yes. Your house? Surrounded. But we got out through the Andersons' yard before they established the perimeter. James had a moment of clarity, knew they were coming before they arrived. Foster glanced back at James. His eyes were open but unfocused, lips moving in silent communication with something only he could perceive. We need to get to Dugway, Foster said. It's our only chance of understanding what's happening and maybe stopping it. It's 1,500 miles away, and they'll be looking for us. I have colleagues who can help, people who aren't part of whatever Vance is running. She pulled out her phone, then hesitated. But first we need to ditch anything they could track. They abandoned the car at a shopping mall, purchased burner phones with cash, and continued in a used vehicle Catherine bought from a dealership lot, using an emergency credit card in her maiden name. James drifted in and out of lucidity as they drove west, sometimes mumbling coordinates and equations, sometimes screaming about the membrane thinning. During one clear moment, as they crossed into Illinois, he gripped Foster's seat from behind. They'll find us, he said. The others like me, the other 8 transmitters, they're all connected now. What one sees, they all see. The other Dugway personnel? Foster asked. Yes, we're networked. Individual consciousness is being subsumed into something larger. He pressed his palms against his temples. I can feel them right now working at their locations, building the amplifiers, and I can feel the others coming, thousands of them, moving toward the 7 points. What happens when they all converge? Activation. Critical mass. The membrane ruptures. His voice dropped to a whisper, and they come through. Catherine kept her eyes on the road, knuckles white on the steering wheel. In the rear-view mirror, she caught James's reflection. For an instant, his eyes appeared completely white, his expression not his own. You cannot prevent completion, he said, his voice layered with harmonics. The network has anticipated your resistance. Countermeasures have been implemented. Then he slumped back, unconscious. Foster checked his vitals. Elevated heart rate, fever, pupils dilated. We need to keep him stable, she said. Whatever's happening, it's accelerating. As they continued westward, reports began appearing on news stations, unusual mass movements of people toward specific locations, attributed to cult activity or flash mob events. Traffic jams in San Antonio as hundreds converged on a suburban neighborhood. Similar gatherings in Tacoma, Frederick, and 3 other locations that matched the points on James's map. "It's happening everywhere," Catherine whispered, watching a news report at a gas station in Nebraska. Foster's burner phone rang. A colleague from the CDC, who had agreed to examine the biological samples she'd sent via courier before leaving Millfield. "Abby, what the hell did you send me?" Dr. Patel's voice was tense. "These structures are... I don't even have words. The cellular material is reconfiguring itself under observation, and the neural tissue samples show impossible synapse formations. Can you determine its nature? Origin? Nothing in our database matches. The DNA, if you can call it that, uses nucleotide pairs we've never documented. And there's something else." His voice lowered. "The samples are emitting low-frequency electromagnetic pulses, rhythmic, like they're communicating. With what? I don't know. But after exposure, 3 lab technicians reported identical dreams last night. Dreams about a desert, and something buried beneath it." A pause. "Abby, whatever this is, it's spreading through proximity alone. No direct contact needed. Destroy the samples, J-ish. Incinerate everything, and quarantine anyone who had contact." "Already done. But Abby, I think it might be too late. The CDC just received orders to stand down on all investigations to the anomalous neurological cases, orders from the highest levels." "Vance," Foster muttered. "Who? Never mind. Stay safe, J-ish. And off the grid if you can." As they entered Colorado, James experienced his most severe episode yet. His body convulsed violently, eyes rolling back, as he spoke in multiple voices simultaneously. "The gate is opening. The network is complete. What was divided will be whole." Catherine pulled to the roadside, and together she and Foster restrained him until the seizure passed. When he regained consciousness, his eyes were clear, focused. James himself, not the thing using him. "They know where we're going," he said hoarsely. "Vance and his team are already at Dugway, monitoring the original site. And the others, the ones beneath, they know too. They're waiting." "Then why go at all?" Catherine asked. "If they're expecting us." "Because there's something at Dugway neither side wants us to find," James replied. "Something in the original containment protocols. Dr. Winters developed countermeasures during the first outbreak, measures Vance's people suppressed." "How do you know this?" Foster asked. "I can access memories now. Not just mine. All 9 of us, from that night. Collective knowledge." He grimaced in pain. "They're trying to stop me from remembering, but there are gaps in their control, moments of clarity." Foster studied him. "The organism doesn't have complete control yet. It's still integrating with human consciousness, learning how to dominate it fully." "Yes," James agreed, "which means we still have a chance, but we have to hurry." Once all 7 amplifiers activate simultaneously, he didn't need to finish the thought. They all understood the stakes. As they continued west, reports emerged of military vehicles establishing perimeters around the convergence points, ostensibly for public safety during mass gatherings of unknown origin. Colonel Vance appeared briefly on national news, identified as the coordinator of a multi-agency response to organized disruptive activities. "Containment through misdirection," Foster observed. On their 3rd day of travel, approaching the Utah border, they noticed vehicles following them, black SUVs identical to those in Millfield. Catherine attempted evasive driving on back roads, but the pursuers maintained contact. "They're hurting us," James said, more lucid than he had been in days. "Directing our approach. They want us to reach Dugway, but on their terms." "Why would they want us there at all?" Catherine asked. James stared at the desert landscape passing outside the window. "Because I'm part of it now, part of their network. They need all 9 original hosts at the convergence points when activation occurs." His hand found Catherine's shoulder. "And Vance's people think they can control the outcome. Study it. weaponize it. Both sides are using us, Foster said grimly. Yes, James's gaze turned to her. But they've overlooked something important. What's that? Free will. He sat straighter, fighting through obvious pain. I can feel the network, feel them pulling at my mind, but I'm still here, still fighting, and I remember something they don't want me to remember. What? How to destroy the gateway. How to sever the connection permanently. His eyes met Catherine's in the rearview mirror. But it comes at a price I'm not sure I can ask you to pay. Before she could respond, a helicopter appeared overhead, and additional vehicles converged from side roads. Their path forward was clear. They were being channeled directly toward Dugway Proving Ground, where both Vance's team and the awakened organism awaited their arrival. The final confrontation was approaching, with humanity's future hanging in the balance. The Utah desert stretched before them like an alien landscape, red earth and rocky outcroppings bathed in the harsh light of late October. Their escort, no longer pretending to be anything else, maintained a precise formation around their vehicle as they approached Dugway's main gate. The helicopter hovered overhead, a mechanical vulture tracking their movement. They're not even trying to hide it anymore, Catherine said, hands trembling slightly on the steering wheel. They don't need to, James replied. His lucid periods had lengthened during their journey west, as if proximity to the source somehow strengthened his ability to resist. The event horizon is approaching. Containment is no longer their priority. Foster studied the military installation growing larger in the windshield. What is their priority then? Observation, documentation. They think they're witnessing a controlled first contact scenario. James laughed bitterly. They have no idea what's really coming. The convoy passed through multiple security checkpoints, each more heavily armed than the last. Foster noted the expressions of the military personnel, not the alert vigilance of security forces, but the wide-eyed tension of people confronting something beyond their understanding. They were directed to a hangar-like structure half a mile from the main facility complex. As they exited their vehicle, Colonel Richard Vance approached, flanked by armed guards. Tall and austere, with close-cropped gray hair and eyes like flint, he projected authority and cold calculation. Dr. Foster, Mrs. Harrington. His gaze shifted. Specialist Harrington, welcome back to Dugway. This isn't a homecoming, James said, standing straighter than he had in days. It's a grave mistake. On the contrary, Vance replied, your return completes a crucial experimental circuit. The other 8 original subjects have already been recovered and positioned at their respective convergence points. Foster stepped forward. You're facilitating whatever this organism is trying to accomplish. Why? Understanding, Doctor. The entity, as we've classified it, represents the most significant scientific discovery in human history. Non-terrestrial intelligence, with the ability to interface directly with human consciousness. Vance's expression remained impassive. The applications are limitless. It's not what you think, James interrupted. It doesn't want to communicate. It wants to consume. Your perspective is compromised by your role as a host, Vance countered. Our observers have documented the entire process objectively. The network being established is a communication system, nothing more. Catherine stepped to her husband's side. Then why are thousands of people being drawn to the convergence points? Why are they building these amplifiers? Mass psychogenic response. A side effect we're still studying. A younger man in a lab coat approached, whispering urgently in Vance's ear. Bring them inside, he ordered. It's starting. They were escorted into the hangar, which had been converted into an advanced monitoring station. Dozens of screens displayed real-time feeds from the 7 convergence locations. Each showed similar scenes, crowds gathering around structures identical to the one James had built in his basement, military perimeters established, scientific equipment deployed, synchronized activation in all 7 locations, a technician announced. "Where's Test Zone 13? James asked suddenly. "The original site." Vance's jaw tightened. "Decommissioned. Sealed." "I need to see it." "Impossible." The facility was determined to be structurally compromised. "We poured 3 feet of reinforced concrete over the entire complex." James locked eyes with Vance. "You didn't decommission it because it was compromised. You sealed it because of what you found underneath." The colonel's composure faltered momentarily. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do. Dr. Winters discovered it after the initial breach. The structure beneath Test Zone 13, predating human civilization, predating most life on Earth. On the monitors, the crowds at each convergence point had formed perfect circles around the amplifier structures. As they watched, the devices began to emit the same blue luminescence observed in the original experiment, energy levels rising across all sites," the technician reported. Foster moved closer to one of the screens. "Those people, they're not just gathering, they're changing." The camera showed civilians standing with arms outstretched, heads tilted back. Visible transformations rippled across their skin, subtle shifts in pigmentation, alterations in posture and proportion. "Fascinating," a scientist murmured nearby. "The entity appears to be modifying human physiology to enhance receptivity." "It's not enhancing anything," James said sharply. "It's converting them into conduits, the final stage before full manifestation." A tremor shook the building, rattling equipment and causing several screens to flicker. "Seismic activity detected beneath the old Test Zone 13 site," someone called out. "Get a team there immediately," Vance ordered. "No," James said, his voice suddenly layered with the same harmonic quality they'd heard during his episodes. "I need to go there now." Vance studied him carefully. "Why should I allow that?" "Because whatever's buried there is waking up, and I'm the only one who might be able to stop it." Another, stronger tremor rocked the facility. "He's right," Foster interjected. "If this is happening simultaneously at all 7 sites, Dugway is the original point of contact. Whatever's beneath Test Zone 13 must be the primary node, the central connection point." Vance hesitated, then nodded to his security team. "Take them there. Full escort, and Dr. Winters too." "Winters is here?" Foster asked, surprised. "Under protective custody. He's been uncooperative regarding certain aspects of the original research. They were hustled into military vehicles and driven deeper into the facility complex." James grew increasingly agitated as they approached the former location of Test Zone 13, now marked only by a vast concrete pad surrounded by warning signs. "They're all connected now," he murmured, eyes fixed on the sealed site. "All 9 of us. I can feel the others, positioned at their convergence points. We're like antenna, focusing the signal." "What signal, James?" Catherine asked, gripping his hand. "The call. The invitation." His eyes met hers, filled with fear and desperate clarity. "They're coming through, Catherine. All of them. And once they do, this world becomes theirs again." The concrete pad came into view, a gray scar on the desert landscape, approximately half an acre in size. As they watched, hairline fractures appeared across its surface, spreading in geometric patterns that matched the diagrams from James's basement. They were met by a haggard man in rumpled clothes, his beard untrimmed, eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. Dr. Lawrence Winters looked nothing like the confident scientist who had overseen Project Eco Variant months earlier. "Harrington," he acknowledged, then turned to Foster. "You must be the CDC investigator who's been causing so much trouble." "Good. We need more trouble right now." "Dr. Winters," Foster began, "I need to understand what—" "No time," he interrupted. "The activation sequence is nearly complete. All 7 amplifiers are synchronized. The entity is preparing for full manifestation. Another tremor, stronger than before, sent cracks spreading across the concrete pad. "What's under there?" Catherine demanded. Winter's expression darkened. "We thought we were building Test Zone 13 on solid bedrock. During the initial excavation, we discovered an anomalous structure approximately 40 feet below the surface. Military protocol dictated we report it immediately, but corporate interest prevailed. The pharmaceutical conglomerate funding, Eco-Variant, wanted the facility operational on schedule. So you built on top of it," Foster concluded. "Yes. We took samples, ran tests. The structure appeared to be organic in nature, but fossilized, inert. Carbon dating suggested an age of over 2 billion years. Winters laughed hollowly. "We thought it was safe. A scientific curiosity, nothing more." "But your experiments woke it up," James said. "Not exactly. The organisms we were working with, the modified prion proteins, combined with local fungal samples, they were the key. The fungal specimens contained dormant spores that had been waiting for the right catalyst." The ground trembled continuously now. Military personnel scrambled to deploy sensors and recording equipment around the perimeter as the concrete barrier bulged upward from below. "Dr. Winters," Foster pressed. James mentioned containment protocols. Winters nodded. "Yes. After the initial breach, I began researching methods to neutralize the organism. I discovered it had one significant vulnerability. Specific frequencies of ultraviolet radiation disrupted its ability to maintain neural connections." "UV light?" Catherine asked. "That's it? Not just any UV, a precise frequency that interferes with the quantum entanglement properties the organism uses to establish its network." Winters reached into his pocket and removed a small device. "This emitter is calibrated to that exact frequency, but it's not powerful enough to affect the entire structure. It would need to be applied directly to the central node." "Which is beneath us," James concluded. "Yes. And according to my calculations, we have less than an hour before the membrane, as Harrington calls it, ruptures completely." On their secured communication channel, reports flooded in from the other 6 sites. The amplifier structures were now generating visible distortions in the air above them, rippling effects that bent light and created what observers described as windows into somewhere else. James stared at the cracking concrete, his expression resolute. "I need to go down there. Place the emitter at the central node." "James, no," Catherine protested. "There has to be another way." "There isn't." He turned to her, taking her hands. "I'm already part of it, Catherine. Connected. I can navigate through it, find the central point." He glanced at Winters. "That's why you developed the emitter as a handheld device, isn't it? You always knew it required direct placement." Winters nodded grimly. "Someone already part of the network would have the highest probability of reaching the central node." "But James," Catherine's voice broke, "if you're connected to it when the emitter activates..." He pulled her close. "I know, but if we don't stop this now, everyone becomes part of it. Everything ends." A massive crack split the concrete pad, venting strange mists that shimmered with bioluminescence. Military personnel retreated as sensors began failing, electronic equipment shorting out in proximity to the rupture. "And how do you propose to do that?" "I'm going down there," James said. "Now." Vance studied him, then the widening fissure. "You understand this is a one-way journey?" "Yes." Catherine gripped James's arm. "Then I'm going with you." "No," he said firmly. "You can't. The organism would overwhelm any non-connected consciousness instantly." Foster stepped forward. "He's right, Catherine. The biological samples I took showed how it interfaces with neural pathways. Without the gradual adaptation James experienced, direct exposure would be catastrophic." The ground heaved violently, widening the central fissure. Through the opening, They glimpsed something massive pulsating below, organic structures that defied classification, neither plant nor animal, stretching downward into darkness. Across all 7 monitoring stations, the amplifiers reached critical energy levels. The crowd surrounding them stood rigid, transformed into something no longer fully human, their combined consciousness feeding into the network that spanned the continent. The moment of decision had arrived. The membrane between worlds was thinning to transparency, and what waited on the other side was poised to cross through, using humanity as its doorway, its vessel, its sustenance. James embraced Catherine one last time. "I love you," he whispered. "Remember that? Whatever happens, whatever comes through, remember there was a part of me that fought until the end." He took the UV emitter from Winters, checked its activation sequence, and approached the fissure. The mists swirled around him, seeming to recognize one of their own. "James," Catherine called, voice breaking. "Come back to me." He turned, smiling sadly. "I'll try, but if I don't, know that this is exactly where I was meant to be. This is why I survived that night in Test Zone 13, to end what began there." With those words, he descended into the rupture, disappearing into the pulsating organic maze beneath. The last they saw was his figure moving with purpose into the heart of something ancient and alien, carrying humanity's final hope in his hands. The countdown to either salvation or extinction had begun. The air above Dugway Proving Ground shimmered like heat waves over asphalt, but the distortion had nothing to do with temperature. Reality itself seemed to thin, creating visual ripples that bent light in perspective. The concrete cap that had sealed Test Zone 13 now lay shattered, revealing a pulsating mass of organic material that defied classification, neither fungus nor flesh, but possessing qualities of both. Catherine stood at the edge of the rupture, restrained by 2 soldiers, as she stared into the abyss where James had disappeared minutes earlier. "We need to establish a perimeter," Colonel Vance ordered, his voice betraying tension for the first time. "Get those sensors recalibrated. I want data on whatever's happening down there." Dr. Foster approached Dr. Winters, who monitored a handheld device, the receiver paired to the UV emitter James carried. "How will we know if he reaches the central node?" "The emitter sends a confirmation signal when activated," Winters explained, eyes fixed on the device's screen. A technician called out from the mobile command center. "Sir, we're receiving reports from all convergence sites. The distortion effect is intensifying. Physical laws are fluctuating within the affected zones." Screens displayed chaotic scenes from across the country, crowds of altered humans surrounding the amplifier structures, which now generated visible tears in the fabric of reality. Through these tears, glimpses of something else could be seen, a dimension of impossible geometries and organic architecture that hurt the human mind to contemplate. "He needs to hurry," Winters muttered. Below ground, James Harrington navigated a biological labyrinth. The structure wasn't simply a container or a vessel. It was a single vast organism, ancient beyond comprehension. Passageways formed and reformed around him, responsive to his presence. The walls pulsed with bioluminescence, casting everything in that eerie blue glow he'd first observed in Test Zone 13. His connection to the network provided intuitive understanding of the organism's layout. He moved downward, following pathways that seemed to recognize him, opening to allow his passage while closing behind him. In his mind, the voices of the other 8 original hosts echoed continuously, his fellow transmitters positioned at the other convergence points. Their consciousnesses were being systematically absorbed into the greater network, individual identities dissolving. James fought to maintain his sense of self, focusing on Catherine's face, her voice, the life they'd shared. "Not yet," he whispered, clutching the UV emitter. "Not until I reach the center." The passage widened into a vast chamber that seemed to stretch impossibly far in all directions. At its center floated what appeared to be a nucleus, a pulsating core of crystalline material suspended in a fluid medium. Surrounding it were thousands of organic structures resembling neural connections, extending outward like the world's most complex circuit board. The central node, James realized. This was the heart of it all, the primary connection point between dimensions, the anchor that held the gateway in place. As he approached, the fluid surrounding the nucleus rippled. The organism had detected his presence, but rather than resisting, it welcomed him, recognizing one of its own modified vessels. James waded deeper into the fluid, which felt neither wet nor dry, but seemed to exist in a state between physical properties. The voices in his mind grew louder, more insistent, as the network sensed his proximity to the central node. "The gate is open," they chanted in unison. "The separation ends. We return." On the surface, Catherine watched in horror as the distortion above the rupture coalesced into a defined shape, a vertical tier in reality that revealed glimpses of something vast moving on the other side. Similar tiers had formed at all 7 convergence points, creating a continent-spanning gateway. "Energy readings are off the charts," a technician reported. "The dimensional barrier is failing. Estimated time to complete rupture, 3 minutes." Dr. Foster gripped Catherine's arm. "He's running out of time." At the other sites, the transformed humans began moving in unison, forming precise geometric patterns around the amplifiers. Military containment had collapsed entirely, as equipment failed and personnel fled from phenomena that defied rational explanation. In the chamber far below, James reached the nucleus. Its crystalline surface pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat, recognizing his biological signature as part of itself. He raised the UV emitter, finger poised over the activation switch. In that moment, clarity washed over him, complete understanding of what the organism truly was, its purpose, its history. It had not come to Earth as an invader, but it evolved here, developing consciousness over billions of years, before humanity's ancestors had even emerged from the primordial seas. When its awareness had grown beyond physical limitations, it had transferred most of its consciousness to another dimensional plane, leaving behind dormant spores as anchors, ways to return and reclaim its original home when the time was right. The experiments at Dugway had awakened these anchors prematurely. The organism wasn't malevolent in any human sense. It was simply reclaiming what it considered its rightful domain, with no more concern for humanity than humans showed for bacteria when sterilizing a surface. "But this is our world now," James whispered to the nucleus. "We evolved here too. We have the right to exist." The voices in his mind shifted, communicating directly with him for the first time, rather than through him. "We predate you. We seeded the conditions for your existence." "No," James countered. "We may have evolved in a world you helped shape, but we became something new, something with the right to determine its own future. You are temporary, fleeting. We are eternal. But we're here now, and we're not ready to end." James pressed the activation switch on the emitter, a focused beam of ultraviolet light, at the precise frequency Winters had calculated struck the crystalline nucleus. The effect was immediate. The organic circuits connecting to the nucleus began to retract, severing connections to the network. On the surface, the tier in reality flickered. The transformed humans, at all 7 sites, suddenly convulsed, the connection weakening. "Something's happening," Winters said, watching his receiver. "The emitter is active." In the chamber, James maintained the beam on the nucleus, which began to vibrate at an increasing frequency. The fluid around him churned violently as the organism reacted to the disruption. "You cannot sever the connection permanently," the voices insisted. "Not today," James replied. "And when you do, we'll be ready." He increased the emitter's power to maximum, causing the crystalline structure to fracture along precise geometric lines. The network's cohesion collapsed as its central node destabilized. Above ground, the tiers in reality began to close at all 7 sites simultaneously. The transformed humans collapsed like puppets with cut strings, the alterations to their biology reversing as the connection severed. Catherine felt it first, a profound shift in the atmosphere, a release of tension. "He did it," she whispered. "He's disrupting the connection." The rupture in the concrete pad stopped expanding, the organic mass beneath receding from view. Sensors registered decreasing energy levels across all convergence points. "The gateway is closing," Foster confirmed. "Whatever he did down there, it's working." But the victory came at a price. The receiver in Winter's hand emitted a shrill alarm before going dark. "The emitter's overloaded," he said grimly. "Catastrophic failure." Catherine pushed past the soldiers, rushing to the edge of the rupture. "James!" she screamed into the darkness below. "James, come back!" Only silence answered. As minutes passed, the evidence of what had almost occurred began to fade. The organic material retreated deeper underground. The rupture in the concrete narrowed, and the air cleared of distortion. Military personnel cautiously approached the opening, deploying remote cameras to survey the structure below. No sign of Harrington, a technician reported after reviewing the footage. Colonel Vance joined Foster, Winters, and Catherine at the edge of the diminishing rupture. "It appears the threat has been contained," he said, his clinical tone returning. "At significant cost." Catherine rounded on him, grief transforming to rage. "Contained? You facilitated this. You moved those people across the country, knowing what might happen." "We couldn't have anticipated the full nature of the phenomenon," Vance replied defensively. "Our protocols were based on the best available information." "Which you deliberately limited," Foster interjected. "You suppressed Winter's findings about the UV vulnerability. You allowed the network to develop because you thought you could control it. The potential applications were never worth the risk." Winters finished. Reports continued to arrive from the other convergence sites. The affected individuals were regaining consciousness, with no apparent memory of their altered state. The amplifier structures had collapsed into inert components, their purpose neutralized. As night fell over Dugway, Catherine remained by the rupture, now barely wide enough for a person to pass through. Foster sat beside her, providing silent support. "He's still down there," Catherine said. "I can feel it." Foster had no scientific basis to contradict her, so she simply nodded. "Colonel Vance is arranging transport back to Ohio for you," she said gently. "But I think you should come to Atlanta first. We need to monitor you for any residual effects from exposure to the organism." Catherine didn't respond, her eyes fixed on the darkness below. Then she gasped, grabbing Foster's arm. "Did you see that?" A flash of light. Foster peered into the rupture, but saw nothing. "Catherine, the strain of the past few days." "There," Catherine pointed. Deep within the darkness, a faint blue glow pulsed briefly. Foster called for assistance, and portable lights were quickly arranged around the opening. A rescue team prepared to descend, but before they could begin, the glow intensified. A hand emerged from the darkness, human, streaked with luminescent blue fluid, then an arm, a shoulder, and finally, the face of James Harrington, his eyes clear and focused. "James!" Catherine rushed forward as he was pulled from the rupture, falling to her knees beside him. He was covered in the strange fluid, which evaporated rapidly upon contact with open air. His body bore no visible injuries, but his eyes held a depth that hadn't been there before. "Catherine," he whispered, touching her face with trembling fingers. "I found my way back." Dr. Winters hurried over, scanning James with various instruments. "Incredible. Your neural patterns have returned to baseline. The connection is severed." "Not severed," James corrected, his voice hoarse. "Transformed." He explained how, In the moment of the emitter's failure, as the central node destabilized, he had experienced direct communication with the organism, not as a vessel or transmitter, but as an equal consciousness. It understood, at the end, he said quietly. It recognized us as separate evolution, not just as an extension of itself. We reached, not exactly an agreement, but a recognition, a boundary. You negotiated with it? Vance asked incredulously. Not with words, with consciousness itself. James struggled to articulate the experience. The UV radiation didn't destroy the central node. It disrupted its dimensional properties enough to force direct communication. In that moment, I showed it everything. Human history, culture, our capacity for both destruction and creation, our right to exist on our own terms. And it just accepted that? Foster questioned skeptically. No, but it recognized that forcing manifestation now would create resistance that might damage both sides. It's ancient, patient. It can wait. James looked directly at Vance. It withdrew voluntarily, Colonel, but it's still there beneath us. Dormant again, but aware now in a way it wasn't before. Catherine helped James to his feet. Can it return? Try again? Eventually. Not the same way. The network has been reconfigured. The gateway closed. He touched his temple, and I brought something back. Knowledge. Understanding. The means to prepare if it ever attempts to return. In the days that followed, extensive tests confirmed James was free of the organism's direct influence. The other 8 original hosts had not been so fortunate. All had perished when the central node destabilized, their consciousnesses too deeply integrated into the network to survive its collapse. The affected civilians at all convergence points recovered fully, with no memory of their altered state. Government agencies implemented an elaborate cover story involving mass hallucinations caused by an experimental chemical compound accidentally released during transport. Dr. Foster returned to the CDC, where she established a classified research division dedicated to studying the biological samples recovered from the convergence sites. Dr. Winters joined her team, bringing his expertise and the research that had developed the UV countermeasure. Colonel Vance was reassigned to an undisclosed position, his involvement in Project Echo variant redacted from all official records. Test Zone 13 was officially decommissioned, the ruptured concrete pad sealed with new material, and the entire area designated a restricted zone under continuous monitoring. James and Catherine Harrington returned to Ohio, but not to Millfield. They relocated to a small rural property outside Columbus, where James began documenting everything he had learned about the organism, its history, and its dimensional properties. It's strange, he told Catherine one evening, 6 months after the events at Dugway. Sometimes I dream about it still, not nightmares, just echoes, like the memory of a conversation that never quite ended. Are you worried it's still influencing you somehow? She asked. No, it's more like knowing a language no one else speaks, understanding something fundamental about reality that can't be easily explained. He showed her the journal he'd been keeping, pages filled with equations, diagrams, and concepts that blended advanced physics with biological principles. This might help us someday, if it ever tries to return. Foster visited them occasionally, bringing updates on her research. During one such visit, she revealed a disturbing development. We've been monitoring birth records in communities surrounding the convergence points, she explained. Children born to mothers who were exposed to the organism, even briefly, show unusual developmental patterns. She showed them brain scans of infants displaying neural configurations, unlike typical human patterns, more complex, more interconnected. They're normal in every other way, she assured them. Healthy, developing typically. But their brains, it's as if they're optimized for something we don't yet understand. James studied the scans. It left a legacy, he said softly. Insurance. The next generation, subtly altered to be more receptive if it ever attempts contact again. "Should we be concerned?" Catherine asked. "Vigilant," James corrected, "not fearful. These children aren't hosts or vessels. They're still fully human, just adapted. Perhaps they'll develop abilities we can't predict. Perhaps they'll be the ones who can truly communicate with it, if the time comes." 1 year after the events at Dugway, Catherine gave birth to a daughter they named Hope. The infant's neural scans showed the same unusual configurations observed in other children born near convergence points. "She's perfect," Catherine whispered, cradling the newborn. James agreed, but couldn't help noticing how, when their daughter opened her eyes for the first time, they seemed to hold a depth and awareness impossible for a newborn, as if some ancient knowledge resided behind that innocent gaze. In her 3rd week of life, Hope began making marks with her tiny fingers. When given finger paints, not random smears, but precise geometric patterns that James recognized from the central node chamber. He documented these drawings, adding them to his growing archive of information, not out of fear, but from a deep conviction that understanding would be humanity's best defense, when, not if, the entity beneath Dugway stirred again. On Hope's 1st birthday, James took his family to a remote spot in the Utah desert, miles from Dugway, but with a clear view of the facility in the distance. As the sun set, casting long shadows across the arid landscape, he sensed something, a faint resonance, like the echo of a forgotten song. "It's still there," he said quietly, "waiting, learning, adapting." "And so are we," Catherine replied, holding their daughter close. Hope looked toward Dugway, her eyes reflecting the dying sunlight. For just a moment, they seemed to shimmer with that familiar blue luminescence. Then she smiled, an entirely human expression of joy and innocence. James watched his daughter, feeling both profound love and solemn responsibility. The breach had been contained, but the story was far from over. It had merely entered a new chapter, one that would unfold across generations. As night fell over the desert, thousands of children across America dreamed of strange geometries and ancient knowledge, their developing minds unconsciously preparing for a future where the membrane between worlds might thin once again. Among them, Hope Harrington slept peacefully in her father's arms, bridging 2 evolutions that had begun billions of years apart, but were now inextricably linked. The gate was closed, but not locked.